Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here with us, and thank you to our panelists for joining us this morning. So I'll start by introducing our wonderful panelists here today. But first things first, my name is Wissal. I lead product and operations here at Datadog, and I'm thrilled to be here. All right, so first things first, I'd like to welcome Robert Wise, so Director of IT at Trizetto Healthcare Products. Thank you for being here with us. Next up, we'll introduce also Paul Richards, SVP of Technology Operations at Citizens Bank. And last but not least, I'll introduce Bobby Argeanton, VP of Platform Operations at Hyatt Hotels Corporations. Thank you for being here with us today. Can we get a little round of applause for everyone? Thank you. All right. So we only have 40 minutes with our panelists today, so I will start with some questions that I've prepared with the team, and then we'll leave time for questions towards the end of the panel so that all of you can ask your questions directly to our panelists. But I believe that the best way is to start one by one, and then feel free to also ask each other questions as needed. All right, so we'll start with Paul. Great, so let's start with Paul Richards, Citizens Bank. So many of you will probably be familiar with Citizens Bank. Citizens offers personal and business banking solutions, student loans, home equity products, credit card, and many other financial solutions. Thank you for being here with us, Paul. We really appreciate it. So Citizens is also one of the top 2 home equity loan solutions in the United States, which is very, very impressive. So thank you for being here with us. And a fun fact is that your team managed to redesign an entire process to apply for home equity loans from 80 to 100 days down to around 20 days, which is very impressive. So would love to hear about that story, especially in the context of securing data, because as we know, process is not just for the sake of process. It's probably because we need to comply and secure all of the data that your customers are sending you. So first things first, would love to hear about the challenges of accelerating a business process that is as important as providing home equity loans.
Thank you, Vitaly, and thank you for Datadog for having us here. The biggest challenge we have is we have 2 disparate types of data. Data that we know, our customers, but then also customers that want to do business with us that aren't part of our organization already, right? So we had existing data that we could leverage and use and was already secured in several different ways. But it's the data that we were getting from the customer. We had to find a way to get that from them in that same timely fashion. So anytime you look to accelerate a process or remove steps with automation through a process, you have to think of starting with a audit-centric mindset. So will this pass audit? Because being in banking, you're in a very highly regulated industry to begin with. So we had to ensure that 1, that data was secure coming in, but then 2, the disparate nature of that data. Every bank has a different statement format, right? Every credit card has a different statement format. So all of that data, including identification, driver's license, things of that nature, all had to come in and be cataloged and OCR through to make sure that 1, we're capturing the right data, but 2, fraud is very rampant, right? So we had to make sure that we had all of our processes and bring in our security team, bring in our fraud team, and start with a mindset of where we can ensure, 1, that this is the right person that we're talking to, but then 2, make sure that the data that we're sending us is factual and proper.
That's very, very thank you for sharing that story. And I'm sure that this is a story that also resonates with many people here in the room. So I guess, how did you do it? Could you share some behind the scenes or a surprising moment or something that you are allowed to share with?
Sure, yes, absolutely. So again, we had 2 different scenarios. One, again, with customers that we knew, that we would use a marketing campaign to be able to send out to them to say, here's a a code for you to use to go to our site, and we wanted to make this a very easy process. So everybody here that's ever applied for a mortgage knows the lengthy process that exists, right? It's not easy. It's a lot of data that's required, and then two, it's the timeliness, right? So we ask you for, bank statements or identification, and then being able to, have a process that allows you to return that to us in a very, fast manner can be very complex. Now, some of the things that we've started to take advantage of is, the FTX or the financial data exchanges. Those have been very, very helpful for us. But then also partnering with other companies like Plaid that really allow us, they're a data aggregator. So now we can rely on them to aggregate that data. However, therein lies the extra scrutiny around security and security of that data, because now you've got now third party, fourth party of data that you are leveraging that you now have to vet that organization. And with security, you've got a very love-hate relationship with, right? So it's the necessary evil of what we have to do to accelerate a process, but also ensure that we protect the bank, protect our customers' data, and make sure that the entire process end-to-end follows a standard or a similar process for each and every customer.
That's very, very interesting. So around 7 years ago, my previous gig, I was in the banking industry, and this is a story that resonates with me as well. So I'm very curious to hear maybe what's changed in the past 5 years that actually allowed you or enabled you to make such a big change in a critical business process for you at Citizens.
So things that have changed, I mean, there's good and bad with acceleration, right? So I'll say back in 2017, 2018, the CFPB kind of really got involved in, setting the standard, right? Europe was very, kind of the leaders in there in building an open banking standard. The CFPB kind of came in and said, okay, we're going to help frame that, but we're not going to be the authoritative body. Hence, the FTX was born, right? So that's really helped us accelerate, because now it's the access to data that allows you to accelerate that decision making, right? And that's the largest part of that. When you're doing any kind of lending products, you have to have the level of scrutiny around, is this, the data that we're using to make decisions, is it viable? Is it accurate? Right, and more importantly, like I said earlier, is it fraudulent? So we have to be very careful of that. So those things allowed us to accelerate, but the other side of that is now over half the states in the United States now have their own version of consumer data protection. So now you have to ensure that when you're securing that data, your security team, your data engineering team, they're all aware of the individual states, especially if you're doing anything across the United States. Each state has their own requirements with some of that data, and they're not standardized. So when you're securing that data and doing the protection of that customer's data, you have to ensure that you're following those standards for each of the states at the federal level, and then your own organization standard as well.
I'm sure, especially with all of these different standards, I'm actually curious how long it took you end-to-end to reduce the number from 3 digits to around 20.
So we started with the customers that we knew, customers we had a relationship with, right? And so we were able to start to finish, we did that just in under 100 days.
Wow.
And so we actually had several iterations, but our next iteration was to now start to market to customers that may not have a mortgage with us, but they had a bank account. So we still had an understanding of who that customer was. So that was kind of the next tranche that we of customers that we went after. And then the third one was people that we didn't have a relationship with, but we wanted to build a relationship with. And so again, we had to build a very similar process that allowed those customers to come in, have a, dare I say, easy button that allowed them to come in, have a process that was very customer-centric and be able to deliver a quality product to them. but then do it still in that same, time frame. So the things that we learned from the customers that were existing customers of ours, we applied those learnings to the next iteration. And again, so now we've accelerated, and we continue to push that envelope to now be under 10 days.
Wow, that's an incredible success story. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right, so next up, we'll move to Robert Wise. So thank you for being here with us. Thank you for being here with us. So first things first, want to start by just giving a quick overview of Trizetto Healthcare, which is a division of Cognizant. So you are a provider of software solutions for the healthcare industry, primarily for payers and for providers. A fun fact, something that was very surprising to me and I would love to share with everyone here, is that your solutions touch more than 2/3 of all insured Americans. That was very impressive. So yes, the impact is very, very clear. So I'm sure that comes with a lot of challenges, especially healthcare data. So we're glad to have you here with us. So yes, first things first. What is something that people outside of the healthcare industry don't realize about the data in the healthcare industry?
Oh my gosh, it's highly regulated, and we are governed not only by different states, because different states have different requirements around data, but we also have federal mandates that we have to abide by, and those can change on what we need to do, how we need to build our solutions. We had transparency come out a few years ago where people would know exactly how much they're paying for healthcare, interoperability, and so you've got to get disparate systems all talking to each other and exchanging some of the right data. And one of the things about healthcare data is that it's the gold standard for bad actors. And so that, credit card data is, I think, $25 to $100 for, a set of that. For healthcare data, it's anywhere from $250 to $1,000 per each record. And the reason that is because, credit cards, you can use it for a while and they can change it. Your health record's not ever going to change. They have all of that information. You can't easily say, well, here's my health record from the time I was 20 to 50. That doesn't change. That goes with you. So it's a lot of information in one spot.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a very unique challenge here, especially in the age of AI, I'm sure. So could you tell us a little bit more about that, especially since with AI, with these bots that are operating pretty much 24/7, you have, a lot more risks there.
We do have a lot more risk, and one of the things that we do is, just with our software, there are a couple modalities that we have. One, it's licensed. You can buy it, you can put it in your data center on-prem or in the cloud, and you can manage it and run it. Or you can say, you know what, I don't want to deal with this risk. We'll put it in your data center, in your cloud, and you guys run it and you manage it, or we manage it within their cloud and we still assume the risk of securitizing it and making sure that it's good. So with that, and given the way AI works, is you've got to be extra vigilant, and it starts from the top all the way down, in that security is just not one team's focus. It's everybody's focus each and every day. Everybody has to realize, from the SREs to the project managers, to the program managers, to the POs, they have to all understand that security is embedded in everything we do. It has to be number one, because clients, companies, everybody out here trust us with their data, and we have to treat it like it's ours. We own it. We want to protect it. It's like a member of the family.
That's, yeah, I think I can empathize with that. I do want my healthcare data to be definitely very secure. So could you tell us a little bit more about how securing this data is different than securing other types of data?
Because of a lot of the mandates on how long we have to keep this data, depending on the type of data, we have to keep it from 7 years, sometimes 11 years. And so we've got to make sure that we've got perimeter defenses around each and every one of the clouds, each and every one of the instances, tenants, accounts. Inside there, we've got to have it micro-segmented. We also need to make sure we have immutable copies just in case, because it's not if, it's a matter of when it's going to happen. You know, everybody's like, well, if it happens, if it happens. No, it's a matter of when. And we just know recently from another healthcare company that had some issues about a year ago, it becomes a very, very big deal very quickly and very public. And so we've got teams around the clock watching the data. We've got scans. We've got pen testing. We've got all of these accreditations that we have to make sure that we get, from SOC 2 to High Trust, FedRAMP, and now StateRAMP accreditations that all work off of the NIST framework, where you have to just, it's not only good enough to say, hey, we have this security, we have these controls. You have to prove it to outside auditors that'll come in every year. So it's as soon as you're done with one audit, it's teeing it up and getting ready for them to come back in next year. Sometimes it's mini audit, sometimes it's full audit. So we are constantly working through and improving our security defenses, our processes, and our procedures.
Yeah, so I would like to double click into the team aspect, or the teams and people aspect, especially since you mentioned that for everyone, security is top of mind. I'm very curious, especially with the changing landscape with AI, with all these vulnerabilities that, you know, these bad actors are looking to exploit, happening or coming up every few days. How do your teams keep up? How do you think of upskilling, training everyone, making sure that they're not only, you know, doing the day-to-day securing, but also staying up to date with everything that's happening?
Yeah, so what we did in the age of cloud, that was a nice little hype that it was like, cloud's not going to be around. What we've done is we've taken people who used to be, hey, I was a storage admin, I was the network admin, I was the backup administrator, and really what you now have, you now have technologists that know all of the technologies and can support it. So we're more in a DevOps model where, hey, if you're the guy, you know storage, you know networking, you know the OS, you understand how security works, you understand the design of the environment that you're in. You may not be the SME, but you know enough because it all plays together. It's a different environment in the cloud. You just can't go, hey, I'm a Windows admin. Well, if you want to troubleshoot, you have to understand storage. You have to understand the threat vulnerability matrix. You have to work with the threat vulnerability team when they say, hey, there's a brand new CVE out there. It's got to be remediated in so many days. If you're not familiar with that process, if you're not intimately familiar with how the environment works, it's a lot of handoffs, and that just wastes time, especially if there's going to be an incident or to prevent an incident. You've got to be nimble. You've got to be quick. And so we make sure that the teams are upskilled and are aware of, hey, this is what's new. Hey, guys, go out there and learn about AI. Understand what can happen now that we've now gone to the age of agentic AI, and these, you know, bots can talk to each other. And then, even when they're not talking, they may wait 30 minutes and do something else, because that's how they're programmed. And so you've got to stay vigilant and on top of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So keeping specializations, but also having a standard layer so that everyone can speak the same language.
Correct.
So I know that a lot of this is unique to the healthcare industry, but I'm sure that some of the lessons learned can be applicable to many, many other industries. So I would love to hear about essentially how did you solve this problem, and what are some things that you can share with the audience? What can others learn from your industry, essentially?
Oh gosh, solve the problem? No.
Continuous.
Yeah, but it's just continuous. It's continuous growth. It's continuous change. Healthcare, like a lot of government industries or anybody that deals with the government, is very slow to change, is very slow to adopt. You know, AI is still seen in some circles as very scary, but you've got to take on the new technology as it comes out. You've got to be on the forefront, not on the bleeding edge, but at least on the forefront of understanding what the technology is and what the impact is going to be. Because at some point, this fad, this this, one-trick pony is going to catch on, and you either are ready for it or you're behind the 8 ball, and everybody knows how hard it is once you're behind the 8 ball to catch back up. And that's a lot of time, and that's a lot of money, and you never really get caught up. You just close the gap, but you don't ever really get caught up. So one of the things I would say is everybody's got to stay vigilant. When the new technology comes out, when they started talking about agentic AI, everybody should be reading up on it and understanding what it is, even if you're not leveraging it today. You may, 3 months, 6 months, your CEO may go, guess what, guys, we're all in. And you don't want to be caught behind the 8 ball and trying to scramble to understand what everybody's talking about, so.
Exactly. As Ollie mentioned yesterday, change is accelerating. Things are happening so much faster than they used to. But for professionals like yourselves, you can't afford to miss a wave, especially if it sticks and turns out to be a real thing. So I think that's a story that resonates with a lot of people here. Yes, thank you so much, Robert. Thank you. And last but not least, we'll move to Bobby Argeanton from Hyatt. So we're moving to the hospitality industry. I believe that most people here in the room will be very, very familiar with Hyatt, so I won't go too much into that, but I did want to call out some numbers just for the sake of scale. So Hyatt operates more than 1,400 hotels, 35 different brands from essentials all the way to luxury in 79 countries. This is particularly interesting, especially with having different regulations and standards by state. I'm sure that becomes even more challenging when you're international and when you're looking at different countries. So I thought that was very interesting. And then another interesting fact was that you also offer a software business, so a booking and reservation platform for other companies, which I thought was very, very interesting. But yes, first things first, would love to hear about the different types of data that you process and that you have to secure, especially in the hospitality industry, and how maybe it's different from the banking industry and the healthcare industry.
Yeah, Hyatt is obviously regulated like the banking industry. We process credit cards, so there's a financial regulatory set of controls that we have to meet. I feel fortunate that I don't have to deal with HIPAA or FedRAMP or these other sort of federal agencies in the US, but we do have to think about these things internationally. So in the US, we have really good controls about PCI, payment card data, the PII, personally identifiable information. Controls are starting to get a bit stronger in the US, and really Europe was leading the way in that sector with GDPR, right? It gave citizens the right to be forgotten, which means that, hey, I don't want you to have information about me as a human, and you need to scrub that from your systems. So that forced everyone in technology who does business in Europe to re-platform, refactor their systems, tag data as personal, and manage it in a different way. And now, we're going to another level that countries like China and Saudi Arabia are starting to have other controls about data import and export. So China has this PIPL regulation that's going to mandate that if a Chinese citizen only travels in the mainland China, their information cannot be stored outside. So there's this data sovereignty set of regulations that we'll have to comply with. Saudi Arabia is going the same way, and then I predict many other countries, Europe and US, will follow. We've got good sort of reciprocal agreements between like the EU and the United States. So as an EU citizen, we can store your data in a US data center. But as you might expect, we didn't build our platforms, we didn't architect them in a way, years and years ago, with this sort of notion of we're gonna have to have these segregated, siloed data stores and control them differently depending on what that country has chosen to do for their own citizens. So it just adds a ton of complexity. And the way I think about data is it's sort of like a base element, right? And you put these things together and they can have different value. So if we put together a set of numbers, it's a credit card number, and we're gonna have to treat that as very sensitive, confidential, and we would attribute tag it as such, and then we can give that a certain treatment. If it's personally identifiable, that's another treatment. If there are certain regulatory controls that says, well, PII data can't be stored out of country, we have to treat it as such. So we have to do data attribute tagging and then a policy framework that allows us to sort of navigate that. But it just keeps getting more and more complex.
I'm sure, especially as you keep expanding. But you mentioned that, and this is something that I also learned in our previous conversations, but that Hyatt used to have a centralized system. I'm actually very interested in hearing about how you managed to move from this one centralized system that stored data centrally to something that's a little bit more decentralized. How long did that take?
It never ends, really. And there's a few reasons for that. So Hyatt was founded in 1957, and the internet didn't exist. And, in the age of computers, we built a central reservation system, and it was built as a monolith. And then, the internet explosion happens, and then we have mobile devices and smart door locks and, check-in kiosks, and we start building microservices that are distributed around that, but still kind of tying back to the central monolith system. And then we acquire a company that has a whole different set of things, and then we acquire another and another and another, which is really great for the business, right? It gives us a broad portfolio of brands, from sort of a typical hotel that you might stay, just, maybe traveling to a conference in New York, to some sort of ultra luxury Park Hyatt Maldives, and it's like a dream vacation. So we have all of these different offerings, which is fantastic, but because we bring them into our portfolio through acquisitions, we bring all of the technology with it. So we run in all the cloud providers and in data centers around the world. We have on-property systems, we have corporate systems. So each time we add a new type of system, new type of technology, new type of data, it just adds the complexity of managing and storing that. And I think one of the things we all have in common here is, and I would say everyone in the audience, is that we have a responsibility to secure data. And sometimes it's regulated and mandated by governments, and in other cases, we want to make sure that we are being a good steward of that data to our customers. I hope that if you stay at Hyatt, you think they're treating my data properly, we're treating it with care. Care is kind of a theme throughout our company. Because if we lose your trust, we lose you as a customer. If my data is leaked at a hotel that I'm staying at, I really don't want to stay there again, right? Because I don't trust them anymore. So we take that very seriously, but because of the always changing technology landscape, the way that we use data evolves. We want to make sure we give you a good personalized experience as someone staying at our property. We want to make sure that we offer you, when you search for a property, the thing that is best fit for you, right? If I'm traveling to Cancun, it may be for business to visit some of my colleagues, but I might also go with my family, and I want to stay at an all-inclusive resort. And so we want to make sure that we offer the best options to our customers, but also protect that data, and it's a tricky balance.
No, I'm sure, especially with the acquisitions aspect. So I just found out that Mr. and Mrs. Smith was acquired by Hyatt in 2023, and I recently used it, and I really loved that website and the whole experience. So I'm curious, do you have processes in place? How do you essentially take on the responsibility of securing all of this data for all of your subsidies and all of your acquisitions?
Yeah, so each acquisition is a little bit different, right? So when Hyatt buys Playa Resorts or some other property it's a hotel. It's like other Hyatt hotels, but they're differentiated in some way as a user experience. But then with Mr. and Mrs. Smith, it's essentially an online travel agency. There are hotels that are as part of that network that brings them into our World of Hyatt loyalty program. And that sort of expands the options that you have as a customer. But the whole platform and the product is quite different, right? So Mr. and Mrs. Smith, if you're not familiar, it's a very curated set of boutique hotels around the world. And they're just phenomenal. There's a property in Norway that has, I think, 7 or 8 different rooms, and each one is unique. One is suspended from cables in a forest, and it's shaped like a UFO, and there's even a button you could press to like put a fog machine to make it look like the UFO is taken off. It's just another world experience.
Now I want to go
No
book
pun
that
intended,
one.
but you know, we have that whole brand and a set of challenges that come with it. And then you mentioned how we also power booking engines for other platforms. So through the Apple Leisure Group acquisition, I would say 4 years ago, that company actually is a SaaS company that would allow you, I probably don't want to say the names of some of those clients, but if you have a business that you want to have a property for someone to go take a vacation, maybe like at a theme park, they run our software for their business, and there's no Hyatt branding at all. And so that's a very different business model. And so the data that comes along with that and how we treat it also adds to this complexity.
That's very, very impressive. Thank you so much for sharing this story. Thank you, Bobby. I think that I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience. And yes, the microphone is right here. Please don't be shy. Oh, looks like we have a...
And we won't have all the answers.
This is a question for Robert. I also work in healthcare, and my company is slowly implementing more and more AI tools into our product. So I was wondering if you have any concerns around the increased implementation of AI having access to more and more PHI and HIPAA compliant data in the healthcare industry.
Wow. Oh, wow, that's one of those tricky questions. I believe that AI can be very useful, but you are going to have to put those guardrails around the data that it can leverage and it can see. Internally, we have built some of our own LLMs that allow us to look at all of our data and our clients' data, but it does not expose it out to the internet. So we can review the data, we can provide the clients with the references that they need, the inferences that they need, but it doesn't go out to the internet. So you've got to put the right guardrails around there, and you have to enable your teams to be able to leverage the tools, because if you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to have people exfilling data, putting it into ChatGPT or something else, getting the result, bringing it back in, so you're going to end up with shadow ops. So you've got to make sure that the tools that you use, Copilot, whatever you've got, are enabled to provide the feature functionality that's needed for developers, for the teams to be able to do the work they need to do. But again, you've got to kind of put those guardrails around it. And I'm assuming you guys would probably have the same issues with everybody wants, AI, but you've got to protect how that data is around. So that's a good question. Thank you.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, one of the big things you've got around AI is protection of that data, first and foremost. And then as you were talking about earlier around the agentic AI, right, you now have an aspect to where you need to have other agents watching the agents to ensure that, that they're operating, performing properly, right? And so that's a constant battle that we're starting to find more and more of, because you do want to accelerate the capability, but you don't want to lose control.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm actually with Datadog, and I focus on regulated industries specifically, so this question goes to all three of you. How has observability helped you in your quest to secure data and abide by the regulators?
Yeah, I think, obviously I'm a fan of Datadog. My team makes fun of me, and literally I'm now on stage at a Datadog conference. So I guess the shoe fits. The observability of how data moves across our systems helps us see where you have maybe data flowing in an unintended way, right? So with data streams monitoring, with log monitoring or metrics, you can sort of see the system in action, and it helps you to see when data is flowing in the way that you like, when there's an anomaly, maybe that's an incident, we can go in and triage it, but it helps us to really understand how our customers are interacting, how our business users are interacting with that data. And just having a good, clear picture of how data is used can help you see where there potentially is risk, where you might have a customer name in a place where it shouldn't be. And then that helps you understand, well, did we fail to identify that as sensitive data and give it the correct treatment? If, you know, I would hate to see this, I haven't seen it, but a credit card number written in clear text into a log file, you want to make sure that you catch that, scrub it, go upstream and tokenize it, and then make sure that that occurrence could never happen again. And observability is the way that we can spot all of those risk areas.
And is it the same
Paul,
for?
do you want to?
I would say it's very similar, but in our case, as we've, you know, modernized and looked at, you know, moving some of our products from very monolithic to using microservices and other things, people had no idea where all the data was. So once we had observability, we're like, oh, this data's stored here, the same data's stored here, oh, the same data's stored here, oh, and it's stored here, and there's another copy over here, and you're like, oh my gosh, why do we have 27 copies of the same data? So it allowed us to build like the dependency maps, and then we could really look at what is the source of truth, and that's really the data you need to keep. The rest of it, you can just kind of, you know, get rid of. We don't need all the logs. We don't need to keep that 7 years, so now we don't need 30 petabytes of the same data copied 12 different ways and just, you know, 1 or 2 columns are changed. So that was one of the things that we're using with observability, and as things go on, we'll be using some more of these new cool features, especially in the agentic AI stuff and the LLM monitoring and the cost and all of those things, because that can spiral out of control real quickly when somebody runs something, you're like, oh, that's 1 million tokens, and now we've blown our budget for the year.
And similar for us, so as we kind of look to deepen relationships with our customers, you may be part of our core banking, but we want you to experience lending products. We want you to experience wealth products, right? So when we look at our entire landscape, they're not all these systems that have to be connected together, but you want to know that the events that make up that customer experience and ensure that you can see all the way from the start of that experience to the end, and especially across as they use different platforms that we then present as a single view. So it's really important for us on the backside to make sure that we've got event correlation, logging capabilities, that we bring all that things together, because it's IT, things break, right? That's where the observability really comes in, so we can return that customer experience to the best it can be as quickly as possible.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
So Marvin Pascal, I'm with Stryker Healthcare. So Robert, I'm probably going to pick on you again. PHI certainly resonates with my industry, but kind of a two-part question for you, Robert, and the other two as well. With PHI, as you go from monolith systems where, you know, you can protect things at the edge and store your data, you know, you own the data. As you start working with cloud vendors like Datadog, first of all, how do you vet vendors for storing PHI? Do you allow third-party vendors access to that PHI that you are responsible for your customers, or do you sanitize that PHI?
Wow. Depending on the vendor, most vendors don't really get access to the actual PHI data. What they will get is they'll get some of the telemetry data from the machines, but they won't actually see our PHI data. And for those places where you could see it, such as if you're using RUM, where you can actually go through and look at the screen capture and the replay, those things would be turned off because, again, you don't want to provide people with any of that. And like I said, a lot of the data is not stored within their instance. It's kind of within our instance, and Datadog has access to it. So then there's a huge vetting process that goes on if you want to add any vendor. And I think it's about, I think the fastest we've ever added any new vendor on was probably 9 months. But it's usually about 1 year to 18 months to get somebody on because they've got to go through a whole bunch of vetting, all kinds of security checks.
So follow-up question then, what tools or processes would you recommend for scrubbing the PHI when you work with third-party vendors?
You have about 20 seconds.
Sorry.
No pressure.
Actually, we actually have our own product that we sell, that we license, that allows clients to scrub their PHI data and put it in lower environments and other environments, so it de-identifies all of that data. It's the same data, it's just certain fields are de-identified, so you actually have real data that you can leverage and get the same type of information.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, and I apologize for rushing you there in that question. But thank you, all three of you, so much for joining us here today. Please, a round
Thanks
of
for having
applause
us.
for
Thank you very much.
for Robert, Bobby, and Paul. Thank you so much for joining us.